Morning, everyone. Liz Truss has come under fire from her own MPs in a meeting with Tory backbenchers known as the 1922 Committee. She's told them to give her government more credit after committing once more not to cut public spending. Liz Truss is facing growing pressure for another policy reversal and was accused of trashing the last 10 years of the Tories' record at a bruising meeting of the 22 Committee. And in Washington, her Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, will today try to reassure the IMF that everyone and everything is under control after the Institute's chief economist said tax cuts threaten to cause problems for the UK economy. Joining us now is the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly. Hello to you, Mr Cleverly. It's good to see you this morning. Thanks for joining us. She had another bruising day yesterday. How's she going to turn this around?
Well, look, the Prime Minister, when she was running for the leadership of the party, made it clear that she felt that we needed to bring taxation levels down from the 70-year high that we're currently looking at, not put taxes up further than they already are, to make sure we have growth in the economy and to ensure that Ukraine is successful in defending itself against Russia. She is delivering on all those three things. And what she was saying to the 22, I wasn't actually in the meeting, but what I know she said to the 1922 is that, you know, we have got to make sure that we help people keep more of the earnings in their own pockets, that we've got to be good custodians of the public purse, but we've got to grow the economy. That's what she's pushing for. I think those are solid, traditional, conservative governmental principles, and I think we should stick with it.
So you're going to stick with the mini-budget?
Well, the last time we spoke, we talked about the changes that the Chancellor had made to one of the elements of it. But ultimately, what that mini-budget was about, we should remind ourselves, it was about protecting tens of millions of people from unaffordable energy prices. So that was the bulk of that proposal. It was about making sure that taxes for 30 million working people were reduced a little bit. And those are really strong principles, and I absolutely think we should stick with those.
OK, so there'll be no other changes? There'll be no more reversals on what happened?
Well, the Chancellor
I'm
is
obviously
making...
referring to corporation tax.
So the Chancellor is going to be making a statement on the 31st of October, which gives a more holistic assessment of the public finances and our response to the global headwinds that every economy in the world is facing. But as I say, the foundations of that mini-budget, protecting people from energy bill prices, letting them keep more of their earnings, protecting businesses from those energy prices, making sure that we're internationally competitive. All those things are really key for the growth agenda that the Prime Minister's put forward. Sticking
with corporation tax or not?
Well, I mean, the Chancellor will come to the dispatch box. I think it's absolutely right that we've made it clear that we want to invest in businesses. And when people talk about, you know, taxing businesses, I think sometimes there's this idea that they're some faceless entities. These are people. These are employees. These are the organisations that help people pay their bills. And actually, they have been under a huge amount of pressure. I talked to the businesses in my constituency. They have really felt the pressure. And it's absolutely right that we help them stay competitive, we help them stay afloat, that we help them compete internationally, employ people, and pay better wages. And that's the kind of thing that we should be doing. And that's why, as I say, the package the Chancellor put forward is pro-growth and is the right answer.
Sounds as though you're sticking with that then. The chairman of the Education Committee, Robert Halfon, has been speaking in the 1922 Committee, as you know. Apparently he says that Liz Truss is trashing working-class conservatism. She's losing the backbenchers unless she changes some of the policies that she put forward as part of the mini-budget.
Well, look, let's remind ourselves what the proposition put forward by the Prime Minister is. She says that, first and foremost, many of these issues are amplified by Putin's brutal invasion of Ukraine, and we need to help the Ukrainians defend their country. We saw in the vote in the United Nations last night, we've got an international coalition of condemnation against Russia in support of Ukraine. So support Ukraine, point one. Bring taxes down a bit from their 70-year tax burden high and grow the economy so that we can pay for the public services. If people are saying one of those three things are wrong, I'll be very keen to find out which of those three things people are saying are wrong.
It's the backbenchers you have to convince.
Well, again, but...
Look at this quote, look at this tweet. It says, Tory MP, it was from one of my colleagues at the Daily Mail, Tory MP on Liz Truss's appearance at the 1922 Committee. It was like someone trying to light a fire using a magnifying glass, using damp wood, in the dark. These are the people that she needs on side to get her policies through.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, some people like having quotable tweets and some people like delivering good government. I'm in the camp of the kind of people that like delivering good government. I know that the Chancellor, the Prime Minister and my ministerial colleagues are focused on delivering for the British people.
OK, well, let's go with a different...
You can't be in the top job in politics.
If you don't want the tweets, let's go with Paul Johnson, the IFS director. Try as hard as we can, given plausible forecasts, we can't see how to get public finances on a sustainable path without big, painful spending cuts or a reversal of the £43 billion tax cuts just announced?
Well, we have got to grow the economy. Growing the economy is the way for... Well, the way we grow the economy is to make sure we are internationally competitive. I'm the Foreign Secretary. I travel around the world and I can see other countries', tax and regulatory regimes, and we have got to make sure we compete internationally with the other places that people and businesses could choose to locate. So we've got to make sure that we are tax competitive. We've got to make sure we are pro-growth. That's why the investment zones are so very, very important. That's why making sure that we don't have an unpredictable tax regime, which is why giving predictability for people and businesses about tax is so very, very important, because when you grow the economy, you can afford to fund the public services on which we all rely. The Prime Minister's been clear that we are going to fund public services properly. She's already made strong announcements about the NHS, about increasing defence spending and other areas. But we have to be good custodians of the public purse. This is public money. This is your money. It's your viewers' money. It's not my money.
Yeah, and the Bank of England has to keep stepping in to try to save our economy at the moment. Ian Duncan-Smith is furious about that, former Tory leader. He's described Andrew Bailey as stupid and the measures that he has put forward as a mess. Do you agree with him?
Well, look, I very much value the independence of the Bank of England. That means we've got to let them do their job. Their job,
is Andrew Bailey
part of their job. No, of course he's not stupid. You don't get to be governor of the Bank of England if you're being stupid. But the point is, the job of the Bank of England is to intervene. It's part of the strong institutions that make the UK such an attractive offer around the world. He is doing his job. Doesn't mean we always agree with everything the Bank of England governor says or does from a personal point of view, and Ian's totally entitled to his view. But he's there for a reason. The bank is there for a reason. They're doing the job that they do. They're independent. We've got to let them get on with their work.
But if you want to grow the economy by 2.5%, which is what you say has to happen in order for these figures to work, then how's that going to happen, given that the IMF has said that the worst is yet to come? And for many people, 2023 will feel like a recession.
Well, we've seen the Labour Party trying to create this negative narrative.
No, this is the IMF.
But the point is, if you actually look at the figures, what you've seen is that earlier on in this year, when we were predicted to have negative growth, we actually had positive growth. The inflation figures that were predicted, we've come in lower those inflation figures. We've got lower inflation than many of our competitors. We have got interest rates which, although they're going up slower than many of our international competitors. Every economy in the world is facing a really, really tough time.
I understand, but you have to get it to 2.5%.
Yes.
0.3% is the prediction for next year.
But the point is that you can't look at those growth figures and say, oh, we want bigger growth figures than that, and then criticise every measure that drives growth. You can't look at those, and this is why we talk about the anti-growth coalition, because there are people that point to that growth and say, well, it's not high enough. And when the Prime Minister comes forward and says, well, we should do this, this, this and this to boost growth, they oppose all those things as well. And you can't have it both ways.
Why are the markets so concerned about what the budget said, the mini-budget?
Well, we have put
You blamed the media last time.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. No, I absolutely didn't.
Go on.
I absolutely didn't. The point that I put, the point that we have been consistent about is we have got to take the action that grows the economy. That means change. Change, we completely understand, can sometimes be unsettling when you've had, a decade-long way of doing business, way of doing government, and the Prime Minister comes along and says, I'm going to do things differently. Of course, that triggers a reaction. But as I say, helping the Ukrainians defend themselves, growing the economy, going for growth, these things are absolutely core to a Conservative government.
But if the backbenchers say she's wrong, if the IMF says she's wrong, if the Bank of England says she's wrong, if the market says she's wrong, surely she has to think again.
So I come back to the point I've made. If you, at our core, the core of what the Prime Minister is saying is that we need to be internationally competitive, we need to have growth in our economy, and we need to address some of the issues that are driving these pressures. The war in Ukraine, our over-reliance on dictatorial regimes like Russia for energy supply in Europe. These things we need to address. Okay. And it's all well and good. And we saw this the other night with regard to votes in the Labour Party. They're very, very critical, but when it comes to putting forward an alternative, no alternative comes forward.
OK, so the Halloween budget will double down on what we've already heard.
What we will stay consistent with is the plan to grow the economy, to protect people from those rising energy bills, to support the Ukrainians defending themselves against Russia, to address some of the international drivers for the difficulties that we're all facing.
We're running out of time. Let me ask you another couple of questions. The India trade deal, they're not at all happy with what the Home Secretary has said. She said, I do have some reservations. Look at migration in this country. The largest group of people who overstay are Indian migrants. As I said, the Indians not at all happy about that comment. How will you fix that next time you're there?
Well, we do have a very strong relationship with India, the people, and of course the Indian government. One of the hallmarks of a strong relationship is you can have a very straight-talking conversation. I met with the Indian Foreign Minister, my opposite number, just a few weeks ago. We were able to talk very, very frankly. And of course, we do want to have an even stronger, and this is strong already, but an even stronger trading relationship with India. We want to make sure
comments like that don't help, though, do they?
Well, look, the point of...
You wouldn't have said it, would you?
So the point of being the Foreign Minister is my job to make sure the relationship works on every level for both countries. That's exactly the conversation I'll have when I speak with the representatives of the Indian government in the future.
Do you think that Queen Camilla should wear the Kohinoor diamond when she is crowned?
Well, look, ultimately, decisions like that are for the palace. What I have seen, actually, through the funeral arrangements for Her late Majesty, is the palace is really very good at assessing the public and, indeed, the international mood. Ultimately, of course, the decisions are for the palace on issues like this. But
we don't want to offend the Indians.
Well, look, we have a fantastic relationship with India and Indian people. And as I say, it's a decision for the palace. And I have no doubt the coronation will be an absolute celebration. OK,
final question before we let you go. Do you support Harry Kane and the FA's decision to wear a rainbow armband in Qatar for the World Cup?
Well, I think that we stand by our values. I think the England football team stands by the values of their home nation. They're a part of the UK. We feel very strongly about this. I've had conversations with the Qataris about the World Cup, about our values. Well, look, again, these are decisions for the FA and individual footballers.
But they need to know that they've got their Foreign Secretary behind them.
So the point is, I absolutely will support them. They're our national football team. They're in an international competition. I want them to win. I've already said to the Qataris, I very, very much look forward to seeing England in the final. I can't remember quite how these stages work out. If it can be England and Wales, that would be even better still. Look,
who would you want to win if it was?
Well, I'm an English MP. It's got to be England.
There we go. There we go. You said it. It's good to see you, always.
Cheers,
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Let's have a look at what the papers are saying this morning, should we? The Eye has the headline, Tories in open revolt against the Prime Minister as backbenchers confront Truss with anger during yesterday's funereal 1922 meeting, in their words. Political turmoil is also covered by The Guardian. The paper says Truss faces new peril as Tories go on the attack over the economy. Rip up your tax plans, top officials urge Truss. Deepening political divides, also shown by the Times newspaper. Blue Wall falls. That's on the front of the Metro, as a new poll predicts dozens of Conservatives could lose seats at the next general election. The Express tells of MPs attacking the Bank of England governor for stupid comments.
And the Star tells of the cost of loathing crisis, details on couples who have split up but can't afford to move out because of the country's economic woes. Still to come on the programme for you a day after the PM's first PMQ since the mini-budget. We'll get reaction from former advisers to both the main parties. Talk to the General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union as more than 100,000 postal workers walk out this morning over pay. And in the next hour, joined by the Shadow Culture Secretary, that's Lucy Powell. NATO defence ministers are meeting in Brussels for the second day to discuss how to best protect the skies over Ukraine in face of continuous Russian bombardment. But Kiev's received a boost overnight, with Britain promising to send anti-aircraft missiles for the first time. The Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, arrived at the summit a few minutes ago. Our Security and Defence Editor, Deborah Haynes, was there and asked him why the UK has committed to sending air defence missiles and not the systems themselves.
They'll join the American systems that they're putting in. They're the same type of missiles, so they'll complement that, and they'll just really augment the American sort of platforms, and those with the missiles they'll use.
And the UK's GCHQ chief this week warned that Russia is running out of weapons. Given the allies' hollowed out stockpiles, is there a risk that Western allies are going to run out of weapons to support Ukraine first?
No, there isn't a risk, because unlike Russia, who has already isolated itself, and we saw that yesterday at the United Nations vote, they need a supply chain, and large parts of their supply chain were not in Russia. They came from all over the world, including in Europe and including, indeed, even in Ukraine. Some of their supply chain was in Ukraine. So we have the ability to refurbish or indeed manufacture a new supply chain, which is what we're doing right now. And the UK-Danish joint-led international fund is all about placing orders in manufacturing space to make sure that we can go on between 23, 24 and keep going on.
And next week, NATO is going to be holding its annual nuclear deterrent exercises. Is that wise, given current tensions with Russia? Isn't there a risk that that would just raise the chances of a misunderstanding, especially given the language that Vladimir Putin is using about his nuclear arsenal?
Well, Russia will also be conducting its annual exercise, I think, the week after or just after the annual exercise. I think that's the key. What we don't want is to do things out of routine. This is a routine exercise, and it's all about readiness. Today, the NATO meeting is all about making sure we are ready for anything. I mean, that is the job of this alliance, is to make sure that the 30 partners together are ready for what is thrown at us, and we have to continue work at that. And so exercising is part of that readiness.
Including a nuclear attack by Russia in Ukraine. How would the NATO respond to that?
Well, I'm not going to sit and speculate. I mean, the fundamentals are NATO is an alliance of all types, conventional and nuclear powers, and fundamentally we are here to make sure our readiness is for whatever is thrown at us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good, thank you.
An American conspiracy theorist has been ordered to pay nearly $1 billion in compensation to the victims of one of the country's worst ever school shootings. Alex Jones had claimed that the 2012 Sandy Hook shooting was a hoax, and that the families of the young victims were actors. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner reports.
Emotional distress damages, past and future, $58 million.
Bound together, first by the murder of their loved ones, then by the conspiracy theorist who compounded their pain. The parents of 5 children and 3 teachers slain at Sandy Hook Primary School have been collectively awarded almost $1 billion. Alex Jones made their suffering his multi-million-dollar business. On his website, InfoWars, he called the Sandy Hook massacre a government invention designed to remove people's guns. The parents, he lied, were crisis actors who faked their children's deaths or even invented children that never existed.
Total of $120 million.
The biggest single award went to Robbie Parker. His 6-year-old daughter Emily was murdered at Sandy Hook. Alex Jones mocked him for years. The harassment was so bad, Parker testified, he had to move thousands of miles from home.
For anybody that still chooses to listen to that man, just ask yourself, what has he ever given you? And compare that to whatever it is that he's taken from you.
Jones was shameless in the face of the damages, asking for donations to his business.
They want to scare everybody away from freedom and scare us away from questioning Uvalde and what really happened there, or Parkland or any other event. And guess what? We're not scared, and we're not going away, and we're not going to stop.
This will be framed by Jones and his supporters as a suppression of free speech. But for the families of the Sandy Hook victims, it's about putting an end to the lies and defending the honour of their loved ones. Martha Kellner, Sky News.
And Alex Jones has said that he will appeal that decision. The head of Qatar's World Cup has said that gay fans will be welcome at the tournament next month, but he also told English and Welsh associations to focus on their teams rather than demand compensation for migrant workers. He spoke with our correspondent Rob Harris, who joins us now from Doha. Hi, it's good to see you. Tell us more about what he said to you.
Yeah, this was Nasser Al-Khater responding for the first time to that statement from the Welsh and English FAs last month about their calls for a worker compensation fund to compensate those who have suffered building all these World Cup projects and infrastructure around me here in Doha. And his message certainly is that they should be sticking to focusing on their teams. Also, he's been asked to respond to the plan to wear One Love rainbow armbands by Harry Kane, the England captain, and Gareth Bale, the Wales skipper. And certainly he's left that decision to FIFA, while he believes they are political statements, perhaps, that shouldn't be taking place at this World Cup. He has, though, been welcoming for gay fans who had been concerned, perhaps, about coming to this World Cup.
We've always said that everybody's welcome here. All we ask is for people to be respectful of the culture.
What would your message to those fans be who are sort of wary of maybe coming, those LGBTQ plus fans?
Everybody is welcome here, and everybody will feel safe when they come to Qatar.
Would that include, say,
everybody?
Gay fans if they were holding hands in public? Would that be okay?
Yes.
That's a message of reassurance to them, obviously.
Yes.
So they could show some form of...
If I held your hand, Rob, right now, and I walked outside the street for hours and hours and hours, nobody would say anything to us.
Well, Nasser Al-Khater did say that Qatar cannot change its laws in terms of the anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. He says that the world has to respect the fact there are local cultures and traditions here in Qatar. They have changed laws to improve worker conditions as they would see it, but rights groups say they haven't gone far enough and there has been too much suffering to build this country up to be able to host the Middle East's first World Cup. Qatar, though, has relaxed things like its alcohol policies, so there will be drink more widely available. And Nasser Al-Khater, the CEO of the World Cup, revealing there will be drunk tanks to allow fans to sober up in a country that isn't used to such boisterous behaviour by fans, or indeed such an influx of supporters. With just 38 days to go now until thousands of fans are due to arrive, and kick-off comes 12 years after Qatar was so controversially awarded this World Cup.
OK, for now, thank you. And we're hearing from the Foreign Secretary about who he is supporting in the World Cup. Is it England or Wales? You can check that out on our Twitter feed at Burley. Now, more than 100,000 postal workers are walking out this morning in what has been described as the biggest ongoing dispute over pay this year. Let's find out more. Ashna standing by for us on the picket line. Hi, Ashna, what is it that they want?
Well, ultimately, the main bone of contention for union workers from rural mail but also parcel force is one of pay. They are demanding a pay rise that's more in line with inflation to reflect the rising cost of living. Postal services will be disrupted because of this action, not only affecting letters and parcels that were delivered yesterday or sent yesterday, but also today too. This is action that Royal Mail say is really brought on by an issue of modernisation. Royal Mail say that every single day since the pandemic ended, the business has lost £1 million per day. They say they need to move less towards letters and more towards parcels to allow them to compete with other courier-based services which operate for longer hours and 7 days a week. This modernisation, they say, if the union, the Communication Workers Union, gets behind it, they will pay more. However, the union stand by the fact they say they feel as though this is an assault on their jobs and they won't back down. There are already some 50 union members behind me here. They plan to stage this action throughout the day. There are picket lines right across the country. In what is now the 6th day of action, there are 19 more days of strike action now planned, the latest of which will be not only today, but the 20th of October and the 25th.
OK, thank you. Also making news for you on The Breakfast Show this morning, police looking for a missing teenager have found human remains in a house less than half a mile from where she was last seen alive. Leah Croucher was 19 when she disappeared on the 15th of February 2019 in Milton Keynes, sparking a massive 3.5-year search. Her rucksack and other personal items were also found at the home on Loxburgh Drive in the Furston area after a tip-off from a member of the public. A spending watchdogs warned that billions of pounds awarded as part of COVID-19 employment schemes were lost in fraud and error. The National Audit Office says the government should have done more to prevent mistakes when rolling out the furlough scheme. A review into what happens to immigrants detained in UK prisons has found that they were disadvantaged compared to those held in immigration removal centres. The review found that many were held in custody for a long period of time, with little or no progress in their cases being made to the Home Office. A Jet2 flight from Dalaman in Turkey to Manchester had to be escorted by RAF jets following a report of a potential threat on board. The plane was diverted to London Stansted under the direction of UK Air Traffic Control. The aircraft landed safely and officers were able to establish there was no threat on board. Plans for Queen Camilla to be honoured with a crown containing the Kohinoor diamond at the coronation next year could be dropped. The controversial diamond was seized by the East India Company in 1849 and presented to Queen Victoria before featuring in the coronation crown made for the Queen Mother's coronation. A spokesman for the Indian Prime Minister's political party has reportedly said that use of the diamond could remind people of the British Empire. We also asked the Foreign Secretary about that. Again, check out what he had to say on our Twitter feed. Liz Truss actually met King Charles at Buckingham Palace yesterday for the second time. Here's what the King had to say to the PM on her arrival. See if you can make out the words.
Your Majesty, lovely to see you again. Oh, it's a great pleasure.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, the King mutters back again. Dear, oh dear. Don't know. What's he referring to? Well, that remains a mystery. Of course, Liz Truss was visiting the King not long after a rather fiery round of PMQs, where she was forced to defend her mini-budget.
We've got to be good custodians of the public purse, but we've got to grow the economy. That's what she's pushing for. I think those are solid, traditional, conservative governmental principles, and I think we should stick with it.
So you're going to stick with a mini-budget?
Well, the last time we spoke, we talked about the changes that the Chancellor had made to one of the elements of it. But ultimately, what that mini-budget was about, and we should remind ourselves, it was about protecting tens of millions of people from unaffordable energy prices. So that was the bulk of that proposal. It was about making sure that taxes for 30 million working people were reduced a little bit. And those are really strong principles, and I absolutely think we should stick with those.
Tamara's here. Didn't say that they were going to stick with the mini-budget.
I think you asked him 3 times, Kay, whether he was going to stick with the mini-budget, and the answer was not a resounding yes. We will stick with the general principles. He talked about the energy price freeze, which, don't forget, was separate from the mini-budget. Yeah. It was done the week before, freezing people's energy bills at a level above what they paid last year, but less than they would have been. And he talked about cutting taxes for 31 million people. That's probably referring to the reversal of the national insurance increase, which MPs voted through earlier this week. Did he mention corporation tax? No. Did he mention the government? Indeed, no commitment there. Did he mention the stamp duty measures? No. The expectation among really quite large numbers of Tory MPs from the conversations I was having yesterday, including ministers, is that a U-turn is in the offing on some of these budget measures, with all the implications that holds for Liz Truss's credibility. Why? Because the Chancellor has to announce how he will balance the books, and he has said he will do so on the 31st of October. If there is market turmoil in relation to that statement, the general expectation is that Liz Truss's credibility will be further and possibly fatally damaged. So they need to restore credibility, and that means coming up with some way of balancing the books. And if public spending cuts are going to be politically difficult, if not impossible, to get through Parliament, then that means U-turning on some of the signature measures that she discussed throughout the leadership campaign, including keeping corporation tax at a much lower level than had been planned. Tory MPs who met the Prime Minister last night talked about the mood being very grim. Robert Halfon, a backbencher who was seen as a champion of blue-collar conservatism, told us she had trashed the last 10 years of what we've been trying to do. Other MPs who are not usually out there complaining about their leader said that she had sacrificed their reputation for economic credibility. It was a bruising session, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to see how Liz Truss turns this around.
OK, for now, tomorrow. Thanks so much indeed. Well, yesterday at PMQs, Liz Truss pledged she wouldn't cut public spending, saying government debts will be paid for by spending public money more wisely. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer called on her to reverse what he called a kamikaze budget. We'll be talking about that with Claire Purcell, former Conservative advisor, and John McTernan, former political advisor to the Labour Party. Good to see you both. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme. Claire, to you first of all, your thoughts on what we heard?
Well, I think the mood in Parliament yesterday was certainly one of bleakness. There are a number of MPs wandering around, just wondering how the Prime Minister is going to come back from this. It was a very tricky Prime Minister's questions. No real questions have been answered as to how we're going to pay down the debt, which is what the markets want. The country needs to understand where it is, if it's going to be able to afford things like mortgages, rent, electricity bills, that kind of thing. And those are the answers that we don't have. And I understand the Prime Minister doesn't want to U-turn so quickly, but I think that in all fairness, that's all she can do at the moment to save all of the crises that are going on.
And your thoughts on that, John?
I agree. I think the mood of Tory MPs after PMQs and later on after the 1922 committee was absolutely dire. And some are definitely thinking, how can we put ourselves and our party out of this misery? PMQs was almost surreal, with the Prime Minister accusing Labour and asking Labour loads of questions, accusing Keir Starmer of U-turning when he'd voted to get rid of the National Insurance Levy. He'd actually opposed, and there seemed to be at times so little connection between the answers the Prime Minister had and the questions that Keir had asked, that it was two separate conversations going on. But a major concession when she said that there wouldn't be spending cuts, which really undermines the whole preparation for the medium-term financial strategy, because it's not possible to square the circle now, which I think is why Tory MPs are wondering how can they possibly get themselves out of this bind. And we are 37 days only into the Truss premiership, and this is still technically the honeymoon period.
I'm sure that, Claire, that you saw Penny Mordaunt's face a couple of times when we were hearing the Prime Minister speaking at the dispatch box. What did you make of that?
I think it kind of spoke for a lot of us who are sitting and watching, but I thought it was quite interesting. Penny Mordaunt was a candidate and would have done very, very well. And it's almost as if she's sitting there saying, this should have been my job. But if you look around the chamber at the time, the faces of many, many Tory MPs were exactly the same. No one has an understanding of how this is going to get better. And I don't think I've seen the mood this bleak for such a long time. Even in the last days of Boris Johnson, there was a certain kind of positivity among members. And that seems to have gone. They don't feel that they're being listened to. So I think that her face probably spoke for the majority of the party and the country.
It does look, John, as though later on in the 1922 committee, that was a challenge for the Prime Minister, with some very unkind comments finding their way onto Twitter later on. How important is it, for the benefit of my viewers this morning, that she has the 1922 committee behind her?
Well, in the end, the only way a Prime Minister governs in the UK Constitution is by commanding a majority in the House of Commons. And if you don't have the support of your backbenchers, because the 1922 is the shop stewards, really, of the Tory backbenchers, if you don't have the support of the backbenchers, then who does keep you in office? Who is it that's going to vote for your measures? You know, the government not only has to put forward a medium-term financial strategy, it's actually going to have to put forward some votes, you know, some issues to be voted on. If you can't, you know, you can't run away forever. You've got to put things up. Will they pass or will they fall? And at the moment, I mean, I thought the most telling comment that came out from the meeting last night was somebody saying it was just a sad meeting. It was just a feeling of deep sorrow. And that feels like the end of a prime ministership, not the beginning. And you know, we are just, you know, we're less than less than 40 days into this. So it must feel terrible in Number 10, to be honest, to not be able to put things to a vote and believe that you've got the backbenchers behind you.
Claire, if you were still offering guidance and advice, how would you sort this?
Well, I think I would probably say that the Prime Minister should listen to the room of the 1922 backbench MPs, because that is going to give you a flavour of the mood of the party and what their constituents are also telling them. Because let's not forget, that's the most important thing. MPs represent people around the country and they want answers. So I think that she needs to take heed of what was said to her by some really senior backbenchers who are not the rebellious types normally. If they are giving you that message, you need to sit and rethink. You need to lay out your plan very, very clearly and get that across to members as soon as you can, because I think that is the only way you can reassure them that you're paying attention, you're listening, and you're willing to change.
And John, what does Keir Starmer do? Does he just sit back and let them infight, or does he stick in the knife?
Keir Starmer couldn't get through to stick a knife in the Prime Minister. There's too many Conservative MPs surrounding her doing that at the moment. Keir has to look like an alternative Prime Minister. His front bench have to look like an alternative government. They have to be very careful not to say anything that spooks the market, a discipline, a self-discipline, which unfortunately senior Tory MPs like Jacob Rees-Mogg don't appear to have, you know, attacking the OBR yesterday. There's a very strange disconnect with the government refusing to take responsibility. And I think Keir Starmer has to say, Labour look sound and will be responsible. As soon as this government decide to put themselves and the country out of their misery, have an election, then Keir Starmer is ready, his team are ready. And that's why this week he put the party on a war footing. He moved his organisation into campaign mode. And I think you prepare in the country, but in the Commons, you have to look sober, not exploiting the pain of the government. You really have to not take any glee in this. This is terrible for the Tory party. It's worse for the country, and it's so bad for so many people. You know, 3,000 people a day coming off fixed rate mortgages, facing doubling, tripling of their mortgage payments as we head into what was always going to be a difficult winter.
It's good to talk to both of you. Thank you. Liz Truss's new government has faced a backlash after lifting England's fracking ban, which was put in place in 2019. Following a series of earth tremors, Greenpeace activists interrupted the Prime Minister's speech at the Conservative Party conference, accusing her of shredding her party's manifesto promises on climate change as well. Let's talk about it in more detail, should we? I'm going to move and go and chat to our guest, Harry Ramadan from DNV Energy Systems. Hello, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. What are you making of what we're hearing from Liz Truss and her policies as far as the green environment is concerned?
I think it's really important that with so much focus on high prices, it's natural there should be a focus on energy security. And different countries around the world are responding differently. You've seen a response from Europe to double down on renewables. Yeah. What's important is that some countries where cost is the main driver will also focus on coal. DNV's Energy Transition Outlook report, which was published this morning, really highlights that the short-term turbulence in the energy markets will not set off course the energy transition. And today's energy system, today's energy system is 80% based on fossil fuels. Our report, which looks at the whole of the world, shows that by 2050, 51% of the energy system will be based on non-fossil fuels, most of that powered by renewables, wind and solar. But that's the good news. The bad news in our report is that we missed the net zero target, which I know your organisation studies very closely every evening. We missed that net zero target by miles, and we have to double down our actions and our investments every year for the next 30 years if we're to hit net zero.
So how much do we miss it by?
Essentially, the 1.5 degree carbon budget that the Paris Agreement is based on will be gone by the end of the decade, and we'll be heading towards 2 degrees by 2050.
And what does that mean for the planet?
That's really bad news. I mean, just recently, in the last few weeks, we've seen the floods in Pakistan, in Florida, tens of millions of people affected. In Europe, how can we forget the last summer? 40 degrees in the UK, 50 degrees in Europe. The impact of climate change in DNV's analysis is something like 17 to 18% of the world's GDP. The cost to do the energy transition is more like 1 to 2%. So we really can't afford inaction at all.
But you have also highlighted an increase in coal over the next year or two. Is that something to be concerned about, adding to that concern?
I think that's the response when energy security dominates. You've got high prices and not everyone can afford. The gas prices are incredibly high and therefore some countries will switch towards coal. There's also an aspect of energy resilience, and when the markets are tight for gas and electricity, coming from either renewables or gas, it's inevitable that in the short term coal will have to be burned because it's important the lights don't go out.
So you support refiring or firing up the coal-fired power stations in the UK?
Well, I think the UK has to. You can't afford for the lights to go out. So, yes, the UK's done a great job. And
that won't be done in time for this winter, though, will it?
No. I mean, the commitments to increase offshore wind from 10 gigawatts to 40 gigawatts is fantastic. And the UK's come a long way in its use of renewable power. But this winter, and all the troubles we have from Ukraine and Russia and the impact on gas means that gas supplies and electricity generation is tight. And in that scenario, I think it's important to look after business and society. And therefore, if we have to burn coal in the short term, it's an inevitability for energy security reasons.
Where do you stand on fracking?
I think in overall terms, DNV always talks about an energy system, and you need to balance that energy system. And we need our own domestic energy. And that can come from renewables, it can come from onshore wind, it can come from solar. What's important is the government outlines a plan in which decreasing oil and gas and increasing renewables is part of it. But you can't just switch off the oil and gas. We need it to meet our energy demands today.
Government's saying that fracking and further North Sea oil extraction is green and good for the environment.
Yeah, I'm not so sure I'd go that far. I mean, the oil and gas industry itself has to lower its carbon footprint, and at some point we have to decarbonise the gas itself. And there we have carbon capture and storage, and we can also produce hydrogen. And that's part of the energy transition that has to happen. But the most important thing is that every country, including the UK, has a range of activities because no one energy source will solve the energy transition.
It's good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Where do we find more about your report? Is it online?
Yes, it is, at dnv.com, the Energy Transition Outlook.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Back to the Royal Mail strike, where more than 100,000 postal workers are walking out this morning in what has been described as the biggest ongoing dispute over pay this year. Joining us now is Dave Ward. He's the General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union. Hello to you. Thank you for joining us on the programme again, Dave. Always good to see you. It's not long since we were having this same conversation. How much further have you got?
Sorry, Kaya, I'm struggling to hear that.
OK, I know there's a lot of music going on behind you this morning. I was saying it's not long since we had this conversation. Have you got any further since we last spoke?
It's not coming through. Sorry. Hang on a sec.
OK, we'll try and sort that out for you, and we'll come back to you in just a second. I know Ashna's down there as well, so we'll do what we can. Meantime, to Somalia, where the United Nations is warning that Somalia is facing catastrophic hunger after years of drought and sporadic rains have destroyed food security. Let's get more now from Yusra.
The skies promise rain, but even when they come, it won't be enough. This is the worst drought the region has seen in 40 years. And the threat of terror group Al-Shabaab continues. Their fighters stalking the edges of these camps. Nearly 1 million people in Somalia have been displaced by extreme hunger, and more than half of them are here. Baidoa is a town that has many displacement camps, and they're well established, but every day they keep growing as more people arrive. Close to half of Somalia's population is now in need of food assistance. Why did you come to this camp? Baidoa has become the epicenter of a looming famine, the human cost of climate change, and it's young children who are suffering the most.
What's wrong with her?
This won't be the first time Somalia faces famine. In 2011, more than 200,000 people lost their lives. Nearly half of them were children. Habiba's son Abdel Karim is a year old and can't even stand upright.
Because his legs are too weak to carry him.
He's just been discharged from this center, an emergency care facility helping stabilize malnourished children. Inside the ward, it's a chorus of cries.
How is this situation different to when famine was declared in 2011?
People are going to die because of the long drought. So there is insecurity and the long drought.
So you think it's going to be worse or better?
Yes. If it is going like this, it will be more than one.
Yeah.
It was serious one will be. Yes, it will be the serious one.
If the rains come, do you think it will get better?
No, because of the raining, it takes time.
I'm so sorry.
For some here, help has come too late, just like the rains. They're from Al-Shabaab-controlled territory. Under a reign of terror, the chances of survival are slim. Drought, hunger, conflict. A battle on all fronts. Yusra al-Baqir, Sky News, Baidoa, Somalia.
We're talking about that in more detail with the World Health Organization later on in the programme. Meantime, let's see if we've got Dave Ward back, the General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union, on strike today, his members. Hi, Dave, can you hear me now?
I can hear you better now, yeah.
Fantastic. That's great. Fantastic. I was saying, making the point that it's not that long ago since we were speaking in a very similar situation. How much further have you managed to get since then?
Well, it's very difficult to negotiate any settlement to this dispute because postal workers are facing the biggest assault on their pay, jobs, terms and conditions in the history of Royal Mail. And what the company did, as you know, they imposed a 2% pay increase when they made record profits of 758 million. They now want to manage out existing employees in the business through unagreed performance standards, and they want to bring in new workers on 20% less pay and increase their working week by 3 hours. At the same time, for businesses and for the public, what they want to do is end basically daily deliveries, start 3 hours later, so deliveries wouldn't be going out to 12 o'clock. And in relation to parcels, which we want to deliver and capture parcel growth, they want to hive that off into a separate business with self-employed owner-drivers. And I have to be honest, Kay, there is no prospect of us agreeing that type of asset stripping business plan and a levelling down agenda. We're up for modernisation, but I would stress to your viewers, and you can come and scrutinise these proposals, this is not modernisation, this is asset stripping, levelling down of the worst sort.
The Royal Mail was saying in response they're losing £1 million a day since COVID and they need to try to find savings somewhere.
Well, look, let's scrutinise that as well. Let's have a government inquiry into what they're saying, because what we know is a fact is that they made £758 million last year when we had an agreement on change, and that agreement was instrumental in bringing the company through the pandemic. Postal workers done a fantastic job, and we changed at the same time, and they made money. In a matter of 3 or 4 months, they're now saying that they're losing £1 million a day. Well, if that's true, the people who are running this business should be sacked for gross mismanagement, because what they've actually done is abandoned the process of change in favour of this asset stripping business plan, and we are absolutely certain it is linked to the company that's trying to buy Royal Mail, which is a private equity investment group based in Luxembourg. This is an absolute disgrace, and you know, we welcome any scrutiny on this, and I would urge you to scrutinise Royal Mail's actual proposals rather than what they're saying about modernisation. There's no sane worker in the UK that would accept what the company are putting forward. And, you know, we are determined, our members are absolutely determined to make sure that we succeed with Royal Mail. We've got ideas, we've got plans for change. We want change, we want modernisation, but not on the terms of something that is going to destroy this business and the jobs of our members.
Just a quick thought on Christmas. Impact on customers for Christmas?
Well, you know, the company have upped the ante. When they said to us the other week about going to ACAS, at the same time they handed us a letter where they ripped up all of the agreements that the union has and that protect our members' jobs. And then they said, let's go to ACAS. I mean, they've opened up a chasm. So our response to that was to signal that we are up for this for the long haul. We're not walking away from this dispute. But let me be absolutely clear, we want an agreement. We don't want to be on strike. Postal workers don't want to be on strike. And I'd like to think that even the government would do some sort of inquiry into what's going on there. This is one of the greatest companies in the UK, and it is being ripped apart, not by workers not wanting modernisation, by the type of programme that you see all too often across the UK, which is destroying the UK economy, and the idea that we're going to have a high wage and growth in the economy when companies are getting away with this sort of attack on workers is just ludicrous. So, you know, we hope it doesn't come to Christmas. We hope we can get them into a position where they abandon that programme and get back to the agreement that we actually had, which, by the way, Kay, the CEO and the chair of the company actually signed up to that agreement only 18 months ago, and the same two people are destroying this business now. It's not on.
Thanks for joining us on the programme. Keep in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Astronomers have captured an image resembling a cosmic fingerprint thousands of light years away. Here we go. If you look closely, you can see 17 dust rings, somebody's counted them, by the James Webb Space Telescope. Each ring was created when two stars came close together and streams of gas collided. The orbit of the stars only brings them together about once every 8 years, is what I'm being told. There you go. It looks like it's quite cool, actually, isn't it? Really cool. Let's have some more cool pictures for you. Here we go. These are some of the ones that have caught our eye this morning. A large mosaic that dates back to the Roman era has been discovered in the town of Rastan in Syria. Syrian officials said it is the most important archaeological find since the conflict began 11 years ago. And this may look like a piece of junk, but it went under the hammer at Sotheby's for a whopping £14.4 million. I don't think it looks like junk. I think it's very elegant, actually. However, the buyer has been prohibited from sitting on it. The chair is only one of 6 surviving folding antique chairs from the 17th century China Ming dynasty and was used by a travelling dignitary. That's pretty cool. And curator Emma Boren polishes the silver-gilt Doncaster Gold Cup that forms part of a dazzling array of stunning silver centrepieces that have been restored and prepared ahead of going on show in a newly revamped display at Temple Newsome House in Leeds. That's a great picture as well, isn't it? Fantastic. Need a bit more elbow grease than that, I think, though. Still to come on the programme for you. We're going to be talking in more detail about the woes for our Prime Minister as her Chancellor has gone to Washington to speak to the IMF. They've not been very complimentary about his mini budget. We were putting to James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, about some of the challenges that Liz Truss has been facing. Seems to be losing the support of her backbenchers. What next? We'll have more on that coming up in a moment.